What's going on, guys? Welcome to the Gen Z Money Podcast, where we turn financial peace to your reality. I'm your host, James Bowman, and today, man, oh man, do I have a treat for you guys. I bring on an actual financial advisor to not only come on and talk about what a financial advisor is, but we talk about everything from who needs a financial advisor, what do they do, what is their role, and we debunk some of the stigmas around financial advisors. I'll tell you this, growing up, not being so financially literate, I always had a negative connotation when it came to financial advisors. I always thought that they were, those old guys who, they just make their money off the poor. You come in there and then you give them all your money and then you never see your money again, right? Because you always hear the horror stories. But today, his name is Joey. I mean, he comes in and he really does a great job debunking and really being relatable. We go in depth on a lot of things. I get his opinion on a lot of things. For example, I've talked about good debts and bad debts in the past. So I wanted to bring that to his forefront and I wanted to see what his opinion was. And there are some things that we disagreed with, but we both really had the same lifestyle premise. So it was really, really enlightening. And I'm the first to admit I'm not a professional when it comes to financial advice, financial coaching. I'm not a professional. I know a little bit about a lot of different things, but this is someone who knows a lot about a lot because he does this for a living. So I really hope that you guys enjoy the show, but without further ado, I don't want to take any credit away from him. Let's go ahead and let's get into the interview, guys. What's going on, Joey? Welcome to the Gen Z Money Podcast. How you doing today, man?
Great. I appreciate you having me.
Absolutely. I appreciate you taking the time to come on, especially it's early in the morning. For those of you guys who do not know, this is Joey Snyder. We met crazily on we met on literally on Call of Duty, but his brother and I are good friends and he put us in contact and he is actually a financial advisor. And so that's why I wanted to bring him on the podcast because a lot of people ask me, should I get a financial advisor? So this is the episode I'm going to direct people to. Do you need one? What do they do? And hopefully we can break it all down for him, Joey.
Absolutely. I hope that could help.
Absolutely, man. So let's just start off with the absolute basics. What is the actual job of a financial advisor?
It's funny, this is the first question you ask because this is literally the first question I ask somebody if they're interviewing for an advisor position, because I think everybody's idea of an advisor is so different, right? So literally the first question I ask someone is, what do you think an advisor is? And of course you get so many different answers. Some people think it's, somebody on TV that you see, right, who's trying to sell some sort of random penny stock. My definition of an advisor is someone who, of course, provides unbiased, objective advice to their clients around all things finance. So not just an insurance or investment product. You want to be able to take the time to consider your situation, your goals, your risks, your time horizon, and your long-term plan. And then from there, create an actual customized experience rather than kind of a cookie cutter approach saying, okay, I know you just told me all those goals and everything you wanted, but I'm going to sell you, my company's insurance product. So I think the main thing is somebody who could actually truly give you objective and unbiased advice and talk about all things finance.
Okay. So I love that. I love that you brought up the fact that, so as a financial advisor, are they all fiduciary?
No.
Okay.
So the term fiduciary has always existed and it's existed for years, but most advisors is a very broad term, just because you could essentially be an insurance agent and quote, be an advisor. You could be just a wealth manager and quote, be an advisor. So typically you're going to see advisors be one of three things, either an insurance guy, a wealth manager, investment advisor, or a financial planner. You'd like your advisor to actually wear all three hats. But as a fiduciary, the main thing with the fiduciary and the easiest way to determine whether someone's a fiduciary is, of course, based on their licensing, but even more so how they charge you to manage your wealth. If they're charging you a fee to manage your wealth, so if you say, hey, I want to do a Roth IRA, right? They need to charge you a percent or IA investment advisory fee. That fee essentially is now correlating your performance to their compensation, right? If your account goes up, you make more money. If your account goes down, you make less money. So obviously they have nothing but incentive to make sure your account's doing well, all while they have to legally work with your best interests in mind in all things, in every form or facet. So unfortunately, no, I would say very small portion of advisors are actually fiduciaries, just because typically people also work in the world of finance are mostly working for a specific company. So they certainly want you to sell that company's product.
Yeah, and real quick, guys, I just threw the word fiduciary out there. Basically, when someone's working fiduciary, like Joey said, they're working with your best interest in mind, and they're not working. For example, if you get an advisor who also sells insurance, they could, if they're not fiduciary and they're not looking out for your best interest, they could sell you insurance you don't need in order to collect a profit. And so you always want to work with someone who's a fiduciary. That's also, and it also goes to other areas of finance. For example, when you're buying a house, you always need to get your own buyer's agent because they are a fiduciary. Everything they do is in your best interest. If you use the seller's agent and you try and save money for the seller, they're not always looking out for your best interest. A lot of times they're looking out for the seller's best interest. So, and it, like I said, it goes with every area of finance, whether it's agents, advisors, and stuff like that. So when should someone start looking to hire a financial advisor?
Honestly, immediately. I know it sounds silly, but really as soon as you can. I think a lot of people have this misconception that advisors are only for the super wealthy, right? If I'm not making $1 million, I don't really need an advisor because there's maybe nothing I could do. Well, I know this probably isn't the best way to put it, but I have to tell people I am an advisor, but a lot more of the time I'm more of just a behavioral counselor, just making sure people do the right thing at the right time, for the right reasons. So typically it's not much more expensive to essentially work with an advisor. All while when it comes to the advisor, of course, a key thing first is a fiduciary. But when it comes to cost, whether you're doing it on your own, you're working at Fidelity, for example, or a Schwab or a Franklin Templeton or Vanguard, any large wirehouse, or you're doing it on your own, really the question becomes who's your fiduciary? If you do it on your own, you're your own fiduciary. If you certainly work with an advisor, now they're your fiduciary, and you have a team. You have a professional who does this literally daily to help manage you and walk you through those various goals and options and so forth. That all being said, just like you mentioned earlier, James, is everybody a fiduciary? No, not everybody's created equal. So certainly do your research, interview with clients, interview as many advisors as you can, just get a better grasp of what they're doing and make sure that kind of what they're doing fits really your personal style and your beliefs. Because there's plenty of people out there who are more than happy to help you. And kind of also tack on what you mentioned about the fee thing. If you're not a fiduciary, they can still do investments as well. They'll just sell you A or C shares. And what that means is essentially the mutual fund company is giving them a fee to basically just sell you a fund. Once that transaction is finished, they walk away. There's no legal ramifications to the recommendations they gave you. So you want to make sure that the recommendations they're giving you, they're legally held to those as well.
Gotcha. Okay, so and you've hit on it a couple of times, but I just want to kind of make crystal clear. How is a financial advisor paid, and how much are they paid on average? Not like not like their salary, but like how much can a customer be expecting to pay advisor?
I was going to joke with salary. It could be there's such a wide range depending on how successful they are. But when it comes to what is it going to cost you? So we talked about insurance. If you get an insurance with an agent, they're paid directly by the insurance company. So $0. So definitely work with somebody. Don't call a company directly. Sometimes you can get discounts. The other two, when it comes to wealth management, 1% of total assets is typically 1 to 1.5 is about what you see. So good example, if you get a Roth IRA, you put $6,000 into that Roth, that's the max you could do. It literally is going to cost you $60 a year to work with an advisor.
Mm-hmm.
That's probably less than what you spend on a weekend out. So I think it's certainly worth doing it. And that's for the year, right? So, and then the third part, I talked about the third hat is also doing a financial plan. One thing that our firm does, but a lot of advisors starting to get into is also doing comprehensive planning, meaning basically taking a playbook and telling you exactly what you need to do in order to essentially achieve your financial plans and your financial planning goals. And a plan itself is probably going to cost you from $1,500 to $3,000 a year. So doing a financial plan is probably the last part of it. you definitely want to make sure you get a lot of things in order first, but it's going to cost you basically 1 to 1.5% per year to manage your wealth to work with an advisor. So it's not a ton. All while you're paying similar fees to do it on your own, you just don't have anybody to help you, right? You have the number you're calling.
And most of the time, this is included in your expense ratios. Is that correct?
Yep.
Gotcha. And the expense ratios, guys, it's just anytime you buy a stock, index fund, a mutual fund, or basically anything on the market, there's a small expense ratio or a big expense ratio for managing that fund, that index, or however. You can see it whenever you purchase.
Exactly right.
Yeah, I do think financial advisors do get kind of a bad rap from TV and kind of like loan sharks.
Yep.
Where it's like as soon as you come in, they're like, "Oh, give me all your money," and then I'm gonna, what's the word? I'm gonna, I can't think of the word right now, but basically, I'm gonna take all your money and I'm gonna take it all, and then you're gonna call me back in a year. Yeah, a Ponzi scheme, or even
of course.
Oh, I can't think of the word right now. But yeah, and it makes us it seems like they're more of teachers, they're more of coaches, they're professionals. Like you always want to surround yourself with professionals. Yeah, you always want to surround yourself with professionals because you can't be the best at everything. So absolutely. You want to have someone in your corner. And I say that I say that even though I personally do not have a financial advisor right now, just because my investing is super duper simple. I'm still in the beginning stages, but that's just me personally.
Yeah.
And it's because I've taken the time to do a little bit of research. All I do is buy index funds and I just hold them forever and ever and ever. And once my wealth continues to build and I decide to go more into the market, less into real estate, then I could end up switching that. But absolutely. And just a real quick question. So as an advisor, when you're essentially coaching people on investing, is it mainly in the market or do you guys stretch into other things such as real estate, businesses, even like crypto and NFTs? And
actually, this is a good question because it also starts off with the first part you said about Ponzi scheme. I mentioned this because when it comes to anything we do, especially fiduciaries, basically everything you do is FINRA or SCIC regulatory. These are the regulatory services that oversight all things finance. So everything we do has to be within those services. So for example, crypto, our broker dealer wouldn't touch it with the 10,000 foot pole, and neither would I. I'll be the last person to ever buy crypto. I think I'll mention this later, but I think of crypto as essentially gambling. It's not a regulated investment product. Mm-hmm. Right. So when you're going into crypto, when you're going into other things like that, just like a Ponzi scheme, all those people who got into a Ponzi scheme were buying a product that somebody sold them. That wasn't even an actual regulated product. It was a dream, right? Because, hey, well, we have this random fund that we built. We control the paperwork. We control the regulation on it, and you're going to buy it. You should probably have some questions, right? So absolutely. I don't want to say that those people are silly for doing it, but a lot of times you want to do the regulated thing. Now, but on the going to what you're just mentioning about the fee, right? So you're asking the fees.
How far does do you guys also consult on real estate or any other thing besides the actual stock market?
A lot of advisors will give a little bit. I do a little bit of work on it, more generalized. A lot of times we're talking about the finance side of it, like how we go about funding things. For example, like real estate, a lot of our clients want to get into real estate, or a lot of them maybe have bought a home and they're getting ready to move and they want to rent it, right? So I like to call ourselves the financial quarterback of the team. There's a lot of things we'll directly do, but for example, managing, whether it's just simply finding a loan, a lender, or finding a real estate agent, we like to kind of help direct that just to make sure that everything's getting taken care of. So like you said, kind of surround yourself around other professionals. So there's certain things like that we will want to oversight, because even something as simple as how you structure your loan can drastically affect your ability to save. So we do give some, but yeah, we're not doing a lot of individual, like, hey, going out, seeking out property. I did that for myself. My wife's actually a real estate agent, so she's that person for me. But yeah, typically we're more talking about the funding side of it. But outside of that, it's mostly just things all in the market or insurance or financial planning.
Gotcha. Gotcha. That makes sense. So, what is your opinion on debt as an advisor? Are there good debts? Are there bad debts? Are all debts bad debts? What is your overall opinion on debt?
I love this question because I think this is also another one of those. Growing up, everybody assumed, hey, paying down debt is basically the first thing you should ever do, right?
Mhm.
Well, the elite of the world leverage debt to essentially continue to build their wealth. Now, obviously, we know we don't have tons of money, but there's certainly we could do that in some fashion. So, yes, I actually think there is such thing as a good debt versus a bad debt. And there's really two layers. The first part is, what is that debt costing us? So the debt's essentially 7% or less. I'm going to argue that you could pay the minimum, invest the difference. The second one is, what type of debt is it, right? Is it an amortized debt or compounding debt? And of course, the goal is to be as efficient with the money that we're saving, right? Because especially in normal income, with people making a regular, a normal salary, your money's tight, right? So then we almost have to make the decision: are we going to put this all towards debt? Are we going to put it all towards assets, or do them simultaneously? In an ideal world, we would do them. We would pay down our debts and build assets at the same time. Because the one thing we don't have, I know you talked about it on a different podcast, was the eighth wonder of the world that we call compounding interest, and that's exactly it. Well, everybody right now is as young as you'll ever be. So if you take the next 5 to 10 years to pay off your debt, you're 5 to 10 years older. That's a period of time that you missed. I think you might have mentioned it too, but the rule of 72 is one I like to use a lot. And the rule of 72 is essentially you take whatever percentage of interest you think you're going to make in the market, divide that by 72, and that's how many years your money will take to double. So for today's sake, let's just assume you're getting at least 7-8%. Your money will basically double every 10 years. So if I miss a 10-year period because I, just not really making finance a big deal, or I'm obviously trying to pay down debt, now that's a period of my money essentially doubling that's missed, right? So definitely going back to the debt example, 7% or less you pay. If not, obviously invest the difference. Of course, if you're not going to invest the difference, if you're simply going to take the money and go spend it or go to Vegas, then I hope you're a good gambler, right? So paying out debt's not a bad thing. But the second part now becomes, all right, what type of debt is it? Is it an amortized debt or a compounding debt? An amortized debt, the interest is built into the loan. So if you get a 6-year, car loan or a 4-year mortgage, you know exactly how much you're paying for the house, no more, no less. Where a compounding debt is like a credit card, right? It's like a snowball rolling down the hill. It continues to build on top of itself. So if you have a 7% compounding debt, yes, that's a big deal. We probably need to pay that off, right? But when you're comparing a 4% mortgage to a 4% compounding investment, that's apples to oranges. The compounding investment's always going to be larger. So it kills me when I see clients who are aggressively paying down their home, for example, and they're not even putting money into the retirement plan through work or their 401k, or putting money in a non-qualified brokerage account. Those are all things you could do and go get a higher rate of return in any looping, 10-year period. You're going to average 10 to 12%.
Gotcha. Okay, so I have a quick couple things. First of all, I'm really glad you mentioned the fact that this only works. The plan you just said only works if you invest the difference.
Right.
It doesn't work if you just go and consume the difference, whether it's on food or items or other liabilities. It only works choosing investing over debt if you actually invest. So I'm so happy that you hit on that, because that's the thing that's overlooked 100%. But I did have two questions. So how did you come to the 7% and under rule for investing over paying off debt? Because for me personally, I like to stick around the 4 or 5%, but that's because I look at what I invest in and it's averaged 8%. And so I think the spread between 4 and 8 is kind of definitely worth it. But how did you come to the 7%?
Good question. One, I'm very similar to what you said. So when we're running plans, I'm always going to assume 8%. So that's kind of our cutoff. The reason why I came up with 7 is most people that I'm meeting, or most clients that I have, just kind of, I know we talked about this a little bit, but majority of my practice is actually physicians and dentists. So most of them have some sort of student loan that they've incurred to, of course, become the practice, to be where they're at. And a lot of times their student loans are right at 6.8%. And student loans fall perfectly into that amortized debt of something that we certainly can pay the minimum or develop a payment strategy and not make that the priority. Making a priority of a $200,000 debt when I'm going to make $200,000 for every year for the next 30 years seems silly, right? So typically it's based off the student loan rates. But even then, whenever you look at a 6.8% amortized debt, you could probably beat that out with a 4% compounding debt, right? So because the way the calculation is, so I think the other thing too is I like the number, but the bigger fact is that we could also validate probably a higher interest rate, just because if it's a amortized debt, it's never going to cost you as much as a compounding debt getting the same interest or grow to, right? So I think when you're looking at your numbers actually fit right. I think it's just more because of the fact that I'm looking at from the amortized rate, but you're right. Technically, a compounding 4% would be perfect, would actually probably outperform that. And you could probably still validate, hey, pay the minimum best difference if you're even getting 4%. So I think our numbers are actually right in the middle. But I like to, just because of the fact it's amortized and typically student loans. Outside of that, you're not going to see a lot of debts that are probably that much higher. Back in the day, as they say, we did have some clients getting like 6 or 7% mortgages. Now they're obviously much lower. But same thing, right? If I have a 7% mortgage, it's also amortized, all while I get usually a tax deduction on that mortgage. So my true cost of that's probably much lower than 7%.
Yeah. And, I actually learned something because I understand the difference between compounding debt and amortized debt. I understand the difference between a mortgage debt and like car loans and credit cards.
Yeah.
But I never had the language to describe the differences.
Let me give you an example real quick, James. Actually, you'll like that. Very quick example.
Yeah.
I always call this $1 million mistake that a lot of physicians do. And very quickly, let's assume you have $200,000 of student loan debt. You're coming out of residency or wherever it is, and you have $200,000 student loan debt. If you were to solve for a 30-year repayment option, it would essentially cost you $1,300 a month. If you multiply that over the next 30 years, it basically costs that person over $450,000 to pay their loan off. Right? When you're looking at that number, you're like, well, that's insane, Joey. Why would I incur $200,000 and then pay more than double for that loan? Right? So of course, my question is always, well, what's your alternative? What would you do instead? Of course, I'll double the payment, right? Or whatever it is. So I said, all right, well, let's just assume you double the payment and you do $2,600 a month instead of $1,300 a month. But all you're gonna do is just blindly believe in me. You're gonna give us, do the $2,600. We'll put $1,300 towards your debt, so paying down debt, and we're gonna build wealth simultaneously. The compounding interest rate, but what do you think? $1,300 a month over 30 years going into an investment account, also assuming the same 6.8%. So I'm sticking with the 6.8% number. The difference is this is 6.8 compounding. What do you think that would grow to from a zero balance?
Well, I mean, I love playing with my little compound interest calculator. So I'm going to say a couple million, at least 2 to 3 million.
About 1.5.
1.5. Yeah.
$1 million right there. And so if someone came to you and said, hey, you're going to essentially just pay $2,600. And at the end of this, you'll have $1 million. You would absolutely agree to that every time. Right. But of course, you talk about obviously things happen in life and, so on and so forth. So, sometimes we could be making a huge mistake down the road and we don't see the realization of that mistake until we're already there. Right. Going back to the time, having that 30-year time window is pretty nice. So anyways, that's just a quick example.
Man, I love how you put that into perspective, the difference that compounding or amortized makes over time. Because like I said, when I think of amortized, I think of things like a mortgage, because I love mortgages, and I don't pay down my mortgages because I love a low fixed rate mortgage. I got like a 2.5 on one property. So I'm beating inflation by a landslide. Okay, so then let's just be very blunt with this question. Do you think student loans are good debt or bad debt?
I view them as good debt. I kind of like to refer to it as cost of doing business, right? You're willing to incur this sort of debt to essentially become whatever it is that you're trying to do, whether you're trying to be a physician, a teacher, whatever it may be. I think the problem is obviously, unfortunately, that there's not always your debt doesn't necessarily result in any equivalent income, right? Because you could very easily have a 6-figure debt and not go make a physician salary, right? So I think that's a whole other conversation. But yes, I do think student loans is actually a good debt and something that absolutely even more so. Of course, there's student loan forgiveness program. So that's obviously something that everyone can explore. So if you do work at a 501c3 for essentially 10 years, you can get your loans forgiven, get that 120 qualifying payments. even more so, even if you don't work at a 501c3, there's a lot of awesome, because you mentioned rates, mortgage rates are low, but so are refinance rates for student loans. So there are companies out there that are giving clients 2 to 3% rate of return on a refinanceable loan. That's well worth it. If I can go get that and refinance at 3% and lock in a 15, 20-year repayment, I know out of sight, out of mind, right? Got it locked in. I can go take that rest of that money and go save it somewhere else, right? So there are a lot of great options. The last thing on that is people worry about the fact that, well, if I go refinance my loans, I'll lose the federal loan forgiveness upon death. Essentially, the loans become my spouse's problem or my family's issue if I die, if I privately refinance. There are private refinancers out there that will honor that. So it's not necessarily a huge concern.
Gotcha. So with that being said, do you ever think there's an apex to where student loans go from being good debt, from being productive debt to a bad debt?
Yeah, absolutely. Of course, if they're higher, like for example, private loans, some people who've taken out private loans are looking at 8, 10%. Yes, get that knocked out. So it all goes back to that interest rate. In terms of the amount, if you're somebody who, this probably isn't really realistic, but let's assume you get a master's, right? Or heck, even a PhD. And now you're a professor and you're making 100,000, but you have 600,000 loans. You're at that point where your only real option is to do a federal loan forgiveness program. So basically you have to work at 501c3. So it's a good thing if you're a professor because you're working at a probably a institution where you qualify for that. But that's also why that federal loan forgiveness program existed, is because there are people out there who are taking significantly more debt out than they need to, and their income's not reflecting that. And now they're in a situation where there's no way someone making 100,000 could afford a $600,000 repayment. That's probably like $4,000 a month. That's like their whole check, right? So the federal loan forgiveness program definitely is something that you should explore if you are someone who's at that scenario where you have a 6-figure debt and your income's not necessarily that much higher, and you're at a 501c3, essentially a nonprofit.
And the reason I asked that is because that's something I really like to hit on now for the younger generation, is like, don't put yourself in that position. Don't go into college, like do your research. Know if you're only going to be making $70,000 a year, you shouldn't be paying $300,000 for a degree. It's a bad rate of return, and
not a good investment.
Yeah, there's always those people like, yeah, but if I make it 70 a year and I have 21, it's gonna take me 3 years to pay off the loan. Just like, no, that's not how life works. You break your leg, you pay rent. No. So that's why I ask, is there an apex? Because I do believe that student loans can be good debt, but they have to be used properly. Correct. You have to understand the salary you're gonna have coming out, and then you're gonna need to understand, you're gonna need a plan to deal with those student loans. Because I understand that the student loan forgiveness is there, but I like giving people the advice to always have control of your own life. Don't be depending on someone else. Like, don't just go take out student loans knowing, okay, the government's going to pay them back. That's not a plan. That's like a plan B. That's not exactly that right. Shouldn't be your plan A, because let's be honest, we could get one politician in there and they could say, boom, it's gone. And now you're stuck with those. That's the reality we live in. So take advantage of it while it's there, if you're eligible, but don't make it your plan A. Yes. That's how I really stand on it. I agree. So moving on to the next question. Has being a financial advisor, has giving people financial advice, how has that affected your own financial journey?
I mean, it really holds you accountable, right? Because you got to practice what you preach. So for example, my wife and I, we're honestly just really, we're already really good savers. And I think that's, of course, even one thing, one of our first dates, we talked about finance. So we definitely have prioritized that in our life. So when it comes to our journey, it's great because, you're able to truly tell somebody, even for example, we have 2 kids now. When I'm meeting class with kids, I tell them exactly what I'm doing and actually show them, right? Just because you really do want to practice what you preach. So certainly for my personal, just a journey in self, it's been awesome. Now, like I mentioned with my own practice too, I do have a handful of clients who are making, most of them are all making over 6 figures. So there's also that part where it also kind of surrounding yourself with people who are making a pretty decent income also kind of gives you some goals, right? So allows you to, so I always do like the fact that you can surround yourself around successful people and continue to do your best to continue to emulate them, right? And do your best to also see your income go up and so forth, and increase that net worth. So the more you can surround yourself around like-minded people, I think the better off it is for everybody's financial journey, right? Whereas if you're hanging out with a bunch of people who'd much rather spend their $6,000 a year on going out, then yeah, that also is an option. You're just not going to have much wealth to show for it whenever you're in your 50s.
Mm-hmm. And I'm glad you brought that up, that you and your wife are on the same page financially, because there are a lot of people who aren't on the same page with their spouse when it comes to finances. I like to say marriage is kind of like a yin and a yang. It's like you always have that super duper saver and you have that super duper spender, and you guys have to equal out. Like that's why you guys are together. So one can help the other spend a little bit and one can help the other save a little bit. So there's always some give and take.
One thing I tell people on that, because you're right, every couple has a different one. The best thing I could give someone is carve out your savings first and then build your lifestyle around it. Mm-hmm. So for example, you get married, now you guys are both making 50,000, right? Whatever it is. Carve out your savings, which just for today's sake, I usually say a 20% salary, 20% savings. Carve that out. Say, hey, we're going to save $1,000 a month. And then now you have the green light to go spend the rest. And then you guys do whatever you want with it, right? So when you put it that way, out of sight, out of mind, then move on. All right. So a lot of times it does help couples meet in the middle versus the one person is just very aggressive about wanting to save, and the other person's like almost at that point not doing it just because they're being told what to do, right? So collectively identify a number, carve that out, and then go spend the rest.
Yeah, and I like to automate it. I like as soon as it comes in, it's going out, and that's how me and my wife are. Like we had to, because I'm the super saver, she's the free spirit, we'll call it. And so she sometimes has to remind me like, hey, babe, you've been talking about getting this for like a month now. When are you going to go buy it? And financial issues are the number one cause of divorce in the United States. So it's really important to have that yin and yang, and it's really important to be on the same page and be willing to sacrifice for each other to make it work. You did mention something that I say all the time in the podcast is your network is your net worth. The people you surround yourself with, you end up sharing the same tendencies as them. Yes. But with that being said, being in the finance world where the salaries are a bit higher, do you personally ever feel, maybe not acted upon it, but felt like you had to kind of keep up with the Joneses,
No, because I'm around them financially and not socially. Right. So for example, I could probably tell you more stories about people who make a lot of money, who spend a lot of money and don't save. So that's the whole other thing. But I think the other thing too is understanding what are those common interests, right? I think, that's one thing too. Your network is, of course, your net worth. But if your network is people who all aren't saving and they're just, kind of trying to flash out, right, and show who's got the better car, then yeah, you're going to be that person. So when we're doing meetings, we're talking about net worth, we're talking about investing, we're talking about saving 20, 30, 40% of your income. We're never really once are we talking about who's got the better Rolex or whatever it may be. I mean, that's not me either. But I think also that is a personal thing. Like, for example, one of my mentors, he is absolutely a brand person, right? He's all about having the nicest thing at all times. But he also makes that his priority in terms of he still is carving out his savings. And then his priority, instead of, like my wife and I, we like to travel and we like to, invest in other areas. They like to, have nicer things. Right. So I think it comes down to, you could still have all those things if you carve out the savings first. So as long as you're continuing to build that savings plan and you're continuing to out of sight, out of mind, like you said, automate it, you're going to be able to do those sort of things. But yeah, I think most people who make that sort of income do run into that issue of keeping up with the Joneses, trying to keep a perception. At the end of the day, no one's going to be there whenever you're 65 years old and you need to pay your mortgage, right? Or you want to stay retired. The finance is technically personal when it comes to your own thing. Of course, working with an advisor is good, but continue to track your net worth, because people also will assume that whatever I have in the bank is my net worth, or whatever I have on my watch is my net worth. No, your net worth is your assets minus your liabilities. And you want that to be a positive number, exactly. A significantly positive number. So yeah, me personally, but no, but my brother too, we come from the country in the middle of nowhere. So, to us, having $1,000 in your bank account was like a millionaire.
Like, right? You made it. Yeah.
So, yeah. So
It's sad. It's sad that that's what your environment sometimes grooms you.
yeah,
It's like as soon as you get $1,000, and yeah, I'm not going to get too far down that because
I'm with you. I could do
yeah.
the same.
Okay, so let's go to the next. So when someone is looking for an advisor and they're interviewing, because I always suggest you always interview at least 3 of anything, whether it's an
Yes.
agent, advisor, broker, whatever you're doing, always interview at least 3. What are some red flags people should avoid when interviewing?
The first one is fiduciary. So for example, making sure they are a fiduciary and essentially just having the right licensure. The other thing is also an independent firm. Essentially, they are not associated with the direct selling agreement, or they don't have their own insurance product. I'll say, and I pick on these companies now, and I will continue to. The Northwesterns of the world, the New York Lives of the world, those are really the epitome of what I'm talking about when I say people who are essentially aren't really working on a fiduciary role, because they're selling you a product. So you could tell your entire deep, darkest secrets about, all your financial planning goals. And once you close your mouth, it's, oh, great. Well, here's my product. You should buy it. Right. So you certainly want to make sure they're independent and they could truly be that way. I like to share my story on this because I think it also gives you a realization or a quick behind the scenes look in how the world works. So when I started doing my interviews, I actually right out of college interviewed with 12 companies, narrowed down to 10, down to 8, down to 4. Got down to the last 2 companies. I'd probably done my 4th interview with them. One was North Star I work at now. One was another company called Premier Wealth Group. And really, the Premier Wealth Group told me what I wanted to hear, and the other company told me what I need to hear. And of course, as a young, naive child, you always want to know, you want to be told you're awesome, right? You don't need to, you don't want to have a realization. I think, so anyways, I of course told North Star no. So I told my current company, see ya, appreciate you, but I'm going with somebody else. Anyways, we start with the company. I get there, also thought they're independent. I realized as I'm working there, they're not independent. They are technically an independent branch and certainly could go out and get other products, but they have a direct buying or selling agreement with one company, and that was the only company we could sell. So whether it was my mother or whether it was a random stranger on the street, everybody was getting the same company. And I realized that I was more of a salesman, not necessarily an actual advisor. So after about a year there, I was like, yeah, this is great and all, but I went back to North Star with my tail between my legs, as they say, and begged for forgiveness. And, they were nice, but they took me on. And at that point, now you could truly be a true advisor, right? So even in that world where they may present themselves to be independent, that's only something that a lot of insurance companies specifically are doing, because they realize consumers don't like the idea of being sold a product, right? People like things like CarMax because you can go to CarMax and there's all kinds of different cars. There's not just one brand. It's the same concept there. They're going out and getting a broker agreement and calling themselves, something house or financial R Us or whatever they want to call it, but they might only really be able to sell one product or incentivize to sell that. And when I say incentivize, getting a drastically higher commission paid to them to sell that company versus another one. So I think that's a big thing to really key in on. And the last one is just that they're listening. And understanding your entire financial picture. You don't really want to be sold something. You want them to be able to truly bring a conversation or a topic to you, have a legitimate conversation about that, and decide, is that something that could better my financial picture, worsen, or kind of in between, right? And truly identify if that's helping me versus every time you come in, they're trying to sell you a new product.
Yeah, I'm so glad you said that. And you also mentioned it earlier in the podcast, because personal finance is personal. And so when you're going into somewhere and they have a generic plan that everyone follows, you should know off the bat, okay, if they're not asking questions, if they're not asking how many kids I have or how much money I have in the bank, if they're not getting at least a general knowledge of your current financial position, and they're just trying to put you on this plan that, 100,000 people are on this plan, then that's definitely a red flag. And also they have to have the heart of a teacher. If you don't understand something and you ask them a question, it should never be, just trust me. That's everybody's doing this. Yeah, everybody's doing this, or just trust me, it's gonna work out. Instant red flag. Okay, no, you need to explain to me, because I like to make it a very, very prominent point that this is your money. They're advising you where to put it. Essentially, they have to talk you into it. They have to convince you that, and a part of convincing goes with teaching.
Absolutely. You're exactly right.
So I definitely think those are some red flags that I know of straight off the bat, but that's also a lot of things that go into interviewing a financial advisor. It also goes into interviewing anybody for professional help.
Of course. Yeah.
So, okay, if we talked about red flags, let's go ahead and talk about green flags. So we kind of already hit on it, but let's go a little bit deeper. Like, what are some good things, like when you go and you're interviewing these financial advisors, what are some good things that you could see?
The first is definitely the questions I mentioned, right? Someone can bring you something. So like I'll have clients pretty often randomly send me an article, randomly send me something they got from some other random company. And we could actually look at it and say, oh yeah, no, this is already something we're doing, or oh, let's take a quick look, let's do a meeting, let's identify if that's a good strategy, or if there's a better option that might be similar out there, right? So truly being able to go through those things, because finances always change. So that's the one guarantee in finance we can give you, is that your plan's always going to change. So continue to be able to adapt. Definitely also that they care about your situation, right? They have your best interest in mind. That's a fiduciary, but also just they know you. But there's a study, actually a couple studies. So one, going back to the red flag, you talked about everybody's doing it. I can't remember the exact number, so this one don't quote me on, but I remember seeing an article that said something like 75% of Americans have less than $40,000 of retirement assets. So if everyone's doing it, that's
you
about
do
what
something else. Yeah.
you know, you don't want to be in that column. But the other one, this one is there was a study, a company called Dalbar does a lot of behavioral analysis studies about just why people do things, for why they do them in the world of finance. And one of them was doing a study of why does somebody either leave their advisor or choose their current advisor. And it was like a series of 20 different reasons. The one that people most assume is, well, of course, rate of return, right? That's obviously why everybody chooses their advisor. That was actually number 18 on 1 through 20. Number 1 was my advisor knows me, which is kind of silly, but you're exactly right. That they're literally somebody you trust, you could go to, you could actually truly feel you can get real objective and unbiased advice. No one reason that they simply know you, right? And like you said, if they're not asking questions, trying to get to know your situation, I think that's a huge red flag. So green flag should definitely be that they truly have your best interest in mind.
That is so interesting. That is because I mean, I've always been the person, like, I don't want the top return. I really do. I have because the difference between 8.5 and 8.6 is, it's not in my best interest. But I think as humans, we value the relationship more than we value the numbers.
Correct.
That's why people sell to people they trust, people buy from people they trust, people take advice from people they trust.
Yes.
So that relationship is definitely super duper important.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I guess my green flag is, a lot of times people can come off as condescending. I guess let me preface this by saying everyone cannot be a teacher. Everyone's not built to be a teacher. Everyone doesn't have the patience. Everyone doesn't have the knowledge level to be an efficient teacher.
Yeah.
Therefore, when you give someone who's not qualified to be a teacher, to be an instructor, the duty to instruct people, they can come off as condescending. They can come off as, look, trust me, just do this.
Absolutely.
So
well, it's also too, like, it's even like, for example, in politics, right? That's a huge conversation topic in recent life. And, I think the biggest issue with people in politics is that they already have an opinion. So when they come to talk to you, if you don't like their opinion, they're already confrontational. I think it's the same thing in the world of finance. Like you talked, if I have a product, or if I have, everyone's getting this cookie cutter approach, and you're not going to fit into that square, then we're going to have an issue. Right. And I think that's the big problem you want to try to avoid is, everyone's not a square peg or a circle or whatever it may be. You want to make sure that when they're coming into the conversation, they don't have their own set opinion or product they're trying to do. They truly are trying to teach you about all things finance. So I think that's actually a really good point, James, that you make is you're exactly right. People can be condescending. It's typically because you just don't agree with what they want you to do.
Or it's because, I mean, and it's a fact, more about finance than this person.
Yeah.
So logically they should listen to you, but it's not how humans work. Exactly, the trust has to be built. If there's no trust, a smart person, if they don't trust you, then they won't continue with you. But someone who is less argumentative or less I'm not sure the right word to use, but they're more likely to just go with whatever you're selling them.
Yep.
And it tends to be that's the people who make the biggest mistakes, and they end up in that 75% that have less than $50,000 in retirement assets. So when someone comes to you, Joey, let's say they're a brand new client, they've never been to an advisor before, and they're just trying to get control of their financial position.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have, and I understand that it's personal, like we've talked about, personal finance is personal, but do you have a generalized order of operation when someone comes with you for financial advice?
So with my personal practice, first thing is we're kind of discovering, right? We're trying to figure out where is everything. So we always make them do what's called a patient chart. So just getting a better idea of where is everything, right? What's your income, your goals, your debts, your insurances, your investments, and so forth. Get a grasp on there. Then we want to go through a 3 to 6 educational meetings of insurance 101, debt management, repayment, going through investment 101, going through a product like overview and kind of summary, and then really a implementation / recommendation meeting. Mm-hmm. So you really do want to go through a series, because like we just talked about, you come to my office, I tell you, all right, you need to do XYZ, and you walk out, you're probably going to be like, there's no way, like this guy just told me, pretty much spewed everything out in an hour, told me I need to do this, and you walk away probably more confused than anything. So it goes into that trust. But so our process is designed to be education by nature first, and then kind of walk the clients through their options and all things finance, but kind of generalize in terms of really how you see it happen, right? Is for us, first priority is we want to pay down our high debts, right? So if we have any of those 7-8% high debts, we want to get those knocked out, or at least create a strategy to get those knocked out. Then from there, we need to build at least 3 months of fixed expenses. We need to at least build a mix, at least 3 months of fixed expenses to float the bills if something happens. And typically, why not more? I usually say no less than 3, no more than 6. And the reason I don't want any more than 6 is you're losing money. You're losing opportunity costs. So if you're somebody who's sitting on $120,000 or $100,000 in assets, inflation averages just under 3% since inception, since 1930. You need that money to grow to 103. You can't do that in a checking or savings account, right? And just over November of last year to November of 2021 was 6.5% inflation. So you're literally losing money by sitting on it. So doing nothing is almost just as bad as doing something in some cases. So then once you have your debts knocked out, your emergency account built up, then we want to start to trickle those funds into investment buckets. So definitely your Roth IRA, your retirement plan through work, and of course, non-qualified plans. So in a perfect world, you would literally be doing all that. So there isn't this one magical button or this one magical system that everybody should do. It's actually utilizing every investment vehicle at our disposal. And my job is to maximize the pros and minimize the cons of those, because everyone has a cost. Everyone has a con to it. There's usually some sort of cost, whether it's taxes or fees. But you want to do your best to minimize those and take advantage of everything, all while being flexible and having options, right? You break up those buckets because you need to have different areas to access funds. You're not going to pull money from your Roth IRA until you're 60, essentially. Same thing with the 401k or 403b, right? So you need to have money in the medium term too, to cover whether it's getting into investment property, whether it's buying a practice, whether it's getting you guys a larger home or the vacation home you always dreamed about. There's a lot of other things that have to happen in the world of finance. You can't just be like, all right, I'm going to build my emergency account and then fund my IRA and call it good. What about the medium term, right? All while that money is also taxable. So we want to diversify from an investment vehicle. We want to diversify from an investment choice, also diversify from a tax perspective and an asset allocation perspective, because depending on what type of assets you hold in various buckets, you could also pay more in fees. So there's a lot of things that go into it. And that's where, of course, having an advisor comes into play, but also where we encourage people to do as much reading as possible. There's a lot of great information out there. The last thing I like to bring is there's a big difference between information and wisdom. There's a ton of great information on the internet, a ton of great articles out there. There's the Mad Money Maxes of the world that talk about buy, sell, trading, or whatever it is. There's the Susie Ormans and the Dave Ramsey of the world that talk about finance. But if you just simply take information, implement to your plan, it could be detrimental, right? So that's where you work with a professional to take the information and we help implement the wisdom, right? I like to use physicians as an example. We can go on WebMD and self-diagnose ourselves, but you go to your doctor to implement the wisdom because they've literally been trained for 8+ years to do what they do, right? So just understand that a lot of great information, not necessarily a lot of good wisdom.
Yeah, and just to hit on that real quick, I mean, there's a great saying like everything is fine until you get punched in the face. So you can do your own investing, and then all of a sudden the market, like a pandemic hits and the market drops 30% and you don't know what to do. Absolutely. Well, having that wisdom in your corner, they have that ability to say, look, we've seen this before. This is what has happened when that has happened. So let's just ride it out. Let's not try and time it. Let's not jump in and out because we don't know what's going to happen. We can just look at what's happened in the past and look, let's just hope it happens again.
Absolutely. You could use statistics on your side, right? It's shown time and time again how the market typically is working. But of course, that also why you also understand the flexibility, but also where you have your money, right? If you're someone who's about to retire, you're 66, and that hits you, it's a bigger impact than if you were 23 or 25 or 30 in your 30s, like myself. You kind of hope it. Really, anybody who's basically less than 40, you hope every day the market tanks, and tanks a lot because we're buying everything on sale.
Exactly.
So it's great.
Yeah, and I just want to go back. I want to hit on a couple of things that you mentioned. I really like how it's not someone comes in, maybe you guys make a plan for them and you expect them to execute. There's an education phase.
Yes.
Where you're educating them on insurance 101 and why you need a will or asset allocation and all the things like that, because you can't expect someone uneducated to make an educated decision on their finances. So I love that the first step is education.
Yes. Sure.
Next, I love how you made the point that you can't save your way to wealth.
Nope.
Our world is not built like that. If you make $50,000 a year, you're not going to save your way to $1 million. You have to invest your way to $1 million. Right. So, and you also brought up inflation and opportunity costs. And what people don't understand is, let's use that $100,000 as an example. Inflation this year was 6.5%. Therefore, the buying power went down 6.5%. That actually adds on to the opportunity cost of not investing the money.
Yes.
So you're losing 6% and you're missing out on, let's just say, an 8% growth for that year. So really, your money could have been up. They combine. It's like getting hit from both sides.
Yes.
So
yes, exactly.
I know that was crazy for me when I saw those numbers. I'm just like, man, I feel bad for everyone who's not investing, but that is why I do this podcast, because if I can at least reach one person and help give them information so they can take to a professional or even implement themselves to start growing their money, it's 100% worth it to me, man.
Exactly right.
I love that you hit on those. So let's go to let's go into an imagination world. What is, somebody walks into your office, they got decent clothes, decent jewelry. What is your ideal client?
Jeff Bezos. Is that an answer?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. I mean,
no. I mean, of course, everyone's. I mean, really, the most ideal client is. So for me, for my practice, is of course physicians, but essentially a physician making no debt, with debt's already knocked out. They're probably sitting on cash, so maybe a couple $100,000 in cash. They're already saving easily 30% of their income and maxing out their retirement plan through work. Those are, of course, unicorns, right? Those don't come around very long. But I think the best clients really for me are ones with, of course, disposable income, but people who are willing to listen, right? Who are willing to listen, who are willing to work, who want to work with you and truly value your advice and your time. There's nothing worse. I think we talked about it a little bit earlier, but there's nothing worse than somebody who seeks out your help or seeks out your advice, but they really just want to tell you about, oh, that's something I already did, or I already know what I'm doing, or, trying to get validation for what they're doing. Me telling you, hey, you should do your retirement plan through work shouldn't be validation that what you're doing is right. Just because you're putting money into your retirement plan doesn't all of a sudden make, check all the boxes and make things right. Right. So that is one big issue that I have, is typically people who want to have advice, but really they kind of more just want to talk about themselves or validate what they're doing as being a good thing. Just like I talked about the information and wisdom thing. So I think the big thing is just understanding, that also recently the huge run in the market over the last few years has created a lot of what I call, the DIY or robot investors of the world. Is a lot of armchair advisors who think they're doing a really good job. Could have closed your eyes and got 10% in any year the last, basically 4 years, right? Like you talked about with getting hit in the mouth, and what do you do afterwards? That's exactly the case. The example my dad always used was, everyone puts their pants on the same in the morning. He was talking about football. Everyone, don't be scared of them, son. Everyone puts their pants on the same. But then he also said, but they all hit a lot harder.
Yeah.
Everyone hits a little bit different, right? And it's the same thing. We all get up and all have access to the same information, but it's what you do with that information that really dictates our success. So I think, someone who's just willing to listen, someone who's willing to go put in the work, because it is a lot of work to go through 4 or 5 meetings, right, of education to truly digest and truly read. And most people don't want to do that. That's why you have the handful of people who are willing to just literally be sold something because they don't want confrontation. Then you have the people who are just willing to do nothing and kind of just sit on the money and say, hey, I'll figure it out later, right? And taking value in that, I think, are definitely some of the best clients.
Gotcha. And I will say, I'll hit on something. I had a debate with someone about this topic of data interpretation.
Okay.
So they were arguing that data is data.
Yes.
And it's true all the time, no matter what. And I said, yes, that is true. Data is data. Data does not change. Okay. But the way data is interpreted is 100% different. And the example I used was the current housing market. I said, we can look at the housing market and it, inflating and inflating, inflating. And I can look at that data and say, I don't think it's a bubble because X, Y, and Z. Yep. You can look at it and say it is a bubble because X, Y, and Z. Correct. That's us taking the same amount of data and coming to 2 different conclusions. Yes. And that's where the saying you said, which is phenomenal, information is everywhere, but you have to listen to the wisdom. Yes. And so
that could not be a better understanding of that, James, in terms of the interpretation, because even like that if you remember the elementary game of telephone, right, where everyone has to kind of keep saying it, even in a game like that, where all you have to do is repeat the words to somebody else. Why does the words change? It's because the person who's listening to it interprets it differently. It's the same concept. You can go look on the internet and read an article about the stock market or housing bubble, whatever it is, and interpret that data completely differently than someone else. That's also why research is a common thing and constantly going, is because we're always kind of continuing to build on top of that data and try to understand even further, right? But there's also so many layers, especially the world of finance. We talk about really 4 things you need to understand before investing is taxes, inflation, how accessible is that money, right? And I always call inflation our stealth tax because you don't really see that. And of course, asset protection. So there's a lot of things you have to understand and look into every single data point. Right? It's not as simple as it's unfortunately not black and white in the world of finance. There's so many factors we have to consider that the last thing it goes down to total net return. I know we don't really, I said, people don't usually work with an advisor based off their net return, but you also have to, that goes back to net worth is assets minus liabilities, but also net return is something that you get after all expenses. So you very easily could be sold by an advisor or really by your own concept. Oh man, I got 18%. Well, inflation was 6. Then you paid 4 in costs. You really only got, 18 minus 6 minus another 4 is 10. You got 8. You didn't get 18, right?
Exactly.
So understand that net return is huge as well.
Yeah. And that's why I tell a lot of people when they're just starting out investing, they're like, well, why not invest in this? Because it has a higher return over the last 5 years. I'm like, okay, well, what is it investing in? Well, I don't know. Well, you have to look at everything. Exactly. You can't just look at the return because if we just look at the return, crypto is the biggest asset in the world. It's the best investment in the world. But let's look at what it actually is. How long has the company been around? How many companies are in it? And so that's why taking the data, there's 100% chance that the data is correct. Of course, as long as it's not falsified data. But how you interpret that data and how you implement the data that you have is always changing. And that's where that wisdom comes in. That's where someone can look back and say, okay, the data was the same 20 years ago. This is how it went. This data was the same 10 years ago. This is how it went. So let's make an educated decision on that.
Right. Exactly right. Absolutely.
Yeah. And I agree. You mentioned like being coachable, not coming in there knowing it all, because there's no point in going to a professional if you know it all.
And your advisor doesn't know it either. So that's the other thing too. Is of course, I don't know it all either, but we have seen enough to at least make an educated decision. And then from us as a team, right, the new client and myself or whoever, you and your advisor can then take the information, actually make an educated decision, right? Versus being set in the fact that, well, my dad always told me pay down debt, so I'm going to do that for the next 5 years and then we'll figure it out.
Mhm.
Well, yes, that might have been the case, but I can't tell you how many times I've had clients bring their parents in and they be just eye-opening conversations, because it's just not, the world of finance is constantly changing. And if you're stuck in kind of the old school train of thought, you're going to be in trouble. So you want to continue to be open to new ideas and concepts and be available to listen to those. Doesn't necessarily mean you have to agree, but at least listen.
Exactly. I love that you ended it on, you don't have to agree with everything, but you have to at least be open to the conversation.
Yes.
Because that's literally the most successful people. They'll listen to the argument.
Yeah.
They always. So Joey, let's transition to a little bit towards you personally. What are some of your, because we know all successful people have goals. They all set goals. What are some of your short-term goals that you want to accomplish within the next 6 months to a year for you personally?
It's kind of the same as it's always been. And that's just literally every penny that we save, we're putting it away. Literally zero wasted opportunity on our end. I know it sounds silly, but my wife, I'm not joking. I am the advisor technically, but my wife is she's the one that keeps the wheel turning. At the end of every month, if we have any money left that's outside of what we're already saving, she tells me and we save it. We're religious about that all the time. So no wasted opportunity. Also understand cash is king, right? So you always need to have money. It's a sad but a really harsh reality when it comes to money goals, right? And I always like to say your goals are only as real as your ability to fund the opportunities available to you. And the keyword there is your ability to fund, right? We want to be able to save so that we have the ability and the opportunity and the option to make other choices. So whether that's getting into an investment property, whether it's getting into, buying something else or what it may be, but cash is king. You always want to make sure you have the ability to fund certain things. So for us, it's just continue to save well, as much as humanly possible, and don't let an opportunity wasted.
Gotcha. I love that you brought that up. Like I say it on every single podcast. I'm going to continue to say it on every single podcast. Wealth gives you options.
Yep.
Like when you have money in the bank, like you have the option. I don't want to go to work today. I want to buy this for someone. I want to give this away. You have all the options in the world. And the choices you make are much different when you have money. You don't have to worry about, you have different problems. Like your problem isn't how am I going to feed my kids? It's what kind, am I going to dabble? I mean, I'm going to buy a little bit of this stock to see what happens. Like the problems are completely different.
Right. And
so here's the problem that I have with some of the big guys. For example, I'm not attacking him personally, but Grant Cardone, for example, he has a very extreme message. Money is trash. Invest every penny. Blah 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 blah. Never save money in a bank ever. I really get it. For people like him, you have to be extreme in order to make people change.
Yep.
But people will literally take the words you say literally. So Absolutely. When you say don't have any money in the bank, that means if I have $1,000, I need to invest it somewhere.
Yep. And
I think that couldn't be any further from the truth. Like I believe, like you said, you should never have more than, unless obviously, like for example, I have more than 6 months, but that's because I'm saving for my next investment property. But my emergency fund never goes over 6 months of expenses because inflation is hitting me and that money could be doing more work elsewhere.
Exactly.
So when someone comes up with that very hard, extreme, cash is trash, spend every dime you have, invest it, blah, blah, blah. I just think it's a bit too extreme and people will take it literally.
Absolutely. So I always tell everything comes back to money, right? First question I tell you is, how does that person get paid?
Mm-hmm.
Clicks, right? Is that person giving it, when they give you a recommendation that doesn't go the way it's supposed to, how does it affect them? Someone like a Greg Cardone, the Susie Ormans of the world, the Dave Ramsey's, their entire job is literally built around followers, a following, clicks, purchases, whatever it may be. They could give you the best or the worst advice in the world, and it has zero implication of their life. They sleep pretty darn good, and they sleep on really nice sheets.
Mhm.
at night because of something you may or may not have done. So the information out there, going back to the information thing, right? He's giving you some okay information, but he also, media in general also kind of sells off of fear. If they were telling you all these roses and rainbows about, kind of validating the things you're doing were great, you would never really take action. So unfortunately, in today's society, really as a whole, the only way people can, you could get people to take action is to instill fear in them. In the world of finance, a lot of times it is a very big gloom and doom and the doomsday type scenario, so that you will call Greg or go buy his book or whatever it is and think that something he wrote in that book is something that no one else knows about. No, that's not the case at all. There's no magical belt to it. I'll probably get into this down the road, but yeah, I could not agree with you more on a lot of the larger, big talking finance guys, because I wouldn't even call them finance. They're media finance, right? They're there to simply get following and so forth, but their actions or advice have zero, financial or fiduciary, implications. You're not going
Yeah,
to sue them
and
at
I
all.
will preface this by saying, like, I do listen to Dave Ramsey. I enjoy his show because he has taught me a lot of different areas. I don't agree with everything he teaches. The same way, like I said, Grant Cardone's message, I get it,
Yeah,
but the way it's delivered is extreme. And then Dave Ramsey's message, I get it, but it's just way too extreme. And
yeah.
they're literally two opposites.
They got to
So
scare you, right, to do something.
exactly. So Grant is like, no, cash is trash, leverage everything, invest everything, never have any money in your bank account. Dave Ramsey's complete opposite. Cash is king. Never go into debt, never do this, never do that.
Yeah,
It's the middle ground
absolutely.
is where
Absolutely.
the real success, in my opinion, happens in the middle ground.
Yep.
Now, whether it's slightly skewed to the left or slightly skewed to the right, that's everybody's personal opinion.
Correct.
I just think if you look at both messages independently, neither one of them are good messages. But again,
100%.
I will follow that by saying I'm a big Dave Ramsey fan. He's taught me a lot about finances, like he talks about insurance a lot and all these other things. So I definitely gain knowledge from him, but it's not a Bible. It's not a religious
Correct.
Bible. The same way
Absolutely.
Grant Cardone's 10x isn't a religious Bible.
Yep.
So, okay, we talked about your short-term goals. Let's talk about what are your long-term goals to accomplish within the next 5 to 10 years, and what does the finish line look like for you? And have you reached the finish line in your opinion?
So similar to the last one, is continue to take advantage of compound interest. If you haven't gotten it here, the theme is long-term perspective when it comes to saving, right? Set and forget it. So continue to do that. I definitely want to add a couple rental properties to our portfolio. We do have a couple as well. So that's certainly something that we're always into and, looking for the next opportunity, of course. But for the true long-term goal is really to have what I never, had or dreamt of, growing up in where we came from. We certainly weren't poor. We had everything we needed, but we certainly, let's just say that their income was very low, and work because I want to, not because I have to. I think that's one of the big things that we preach a lot, right? People say, hey, well, I want to retire at 65, but if I could retire at 50, that'd be great too, and just building wealth constantly, making, my money work for itself while we fund a lifestyle, to, of course, see my kids grow up, be able to go to all their events and just have that life where we could have a nice life and work balance. I think it's something that everyone wants. I no longer want to work 80 plus hours a week. That's crazy, especially when you got kids and a family, but also is to have that option that at some point in time, my wife and I can sit back and say, hey, let's enjoy our successes and truly be able to spend a month or two, somewhere else and not have to kind of be here in the grind. So certainly, definitely not, I would say definitely not the finish line. My wife would probably tell you I'll never be there because she probably thinks I like to work too much. But to have that option to, like you said, to not worry about how am I going to pay for my kids' college, or how am I going to pay for stuff, but to have that taken care of and be in a spot where we're literally working just because it's giving us something to do. Right. That all said, for those people who are listening, and people who are just talking about those goals, right? Everyone's different. I think the one thing we have to understand is your plan's always going to change. So just be able to be flexible, to be able to really play offense rather than defense, right? To be able to make those choices. The other thing, I know we're actually segues good into also the Dave Ramsey's and just the general advice going out there, is I think people need to stop believing that they're going to be the next big lucky winner. And what I mean by that is, have you ever thought about the definition of luck? People assume that just, you walk by and there's $100 on the floor. No, luck is whenever opportunity meets preparation. And that's exactly what you want to do is give yourself and make your own luck. It is your own finances. Finances are personal. Take control of that. It's your life, right? You want to be able to plan for future expenses, to have a mindset rather than having a mindset of, oh, I'll worry about retirement later, right? Right now it's not a big deal, or I'll do it. You always say, I'll go to the gym Monday, right? I've been saying I'll go to the gym Monday for quite some time, but don't do that with your finances. And, understand that, if you do your research, educate yourself, and understand that, trying to be the next overnight millionaire by crypto is not an investment, it's gambling. Spending your last dollar on some random Reddit stock scheme like GameStop, that's not smart investing, right? Do your research, educate yourself, do a lot of comparisons, do your best to interview advisors like we talked about, or at least if you can do it on your own, read as many books as possible. There is a lot of great information out there. There's nothing sexy about long-term financial planning or just financial planning goals. I like to do a lot of correlation between the fitness industry and finance, right? In the fitness industry, we all know what it takes to get in shape. Diet, exercise, but consistently diet and exercising for literally continuous years, right? Mm-hmm. If you're someone who goes and buys the new Kardashian tea or some slimming belt, that is a temporary fix to short and give you a very short-term solution, but it's not going to be the long-term one, right? So we just have to understand that we don't want to give ourselves temporary fixes. And when it comes to long-term planning, create a long-term plan, set aside your 20%, goal, like I mentioned, fund your retirement plan, and continue to do that for the next 30 plus years. And you will have that option too, right? Mm-hmm. But stop looking for kind of the get rich quick scheme. That's something that I think everybody assumes if I read a book, they're going to give me something that's going to make me a millionaire overnight. No, nothing comes easy, and it's all hard work. So I know that's a common theme you probably hear with a lot of people that come on this podcast or just other podcasts as well, is that, people didn't just walk into success, they made it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I love how your wife's she's got the gist of it. It's like the finish line is always moving. It's like, as soon as you get close, you're like, I think I'm gonna go a little bit further. Yes. And it's a repetitive thing, and it's a good thing in some ways. It could also be a bad thing if right. you become obsessive over it. But I have a little bit of a personal question for you.
Okay.
So you came from essentially a lower income household growing up. I also share the same thing. How do you, but at the same time, we were both appreciative of where we came from.
Yeah. Absolutely.
How do you plan to raise your kids? Because they're being brought up in such a different household financially. How do you plan on raising them to be appreciative for not only what you guys have built, but to not be that rich kid?
Yeah. That's actually a great question. And I'm not joking. This is like hilarious timing. I had a meeting this Friday, so just 2 days ago, with the client. She's, essentially, she said when she was growing up, this is not a joke. For her birthday, and she had three siblings. For their birthday, every year they were so poor that their birthday present was 2 hard-boiled eggs, and they look forward to that to every day. So when you talk about being poor, unless your birthday present is 2 hard-boiled eggs, you're probably never really that poor, right? Mm-hmm. But we were talking about this because she says, now she has a 17-year-old and a 5-year-old, and she's, that thing where she's like, well, I didn't have anything growing up, right? Like, you should have to work for everything, right? And I've battled with myself to fight that, because I agree. That's kind of how I've gotten into it. It's like, hey, I'm rich, not you.
We're not rich. I love that, man. I love that.
Right. But the fact is, also when you take it, so for me, for example, college education, one thing that I am doing is I'm saving for their college. But my philosophy with that is I'm not going to tell them about it. They're not going to know that they have college fund, basic college paid for. Mm-hmm. But when they get to college, I'm going to make them go. I'm going to make them, they don't go. It is what it is. But if they go, they're going to take their own loans. When you take out loans as undergrad, they are in forbearance. They don't grow interest until you go into repayment. Mm-hmm. And then if they graduate, I'm going to come to their graduation with a check and get it paid off. Mm-hmm. But if they don't, that's your fault. You incurred that. You decided you wanted to go. You wanted to fill out. You didn't want to take it serious. You didn't want to have some skin in the game. Now that's your problem, right? So you want them to feel like there's some skin in the game. They're really still working, knowing that, yes, mom and dad got you, but at some point you got to take care of it, right? So I was telling her, I'm battling with being very strict on, oh, you're not getting anything. But also, the more I think about it, what a great blessing it is to be able to give your kids a lifestyle and a sense of security that you never got as a kid growing up financially, right? Even my wife laughs at me. I love to get random snacks at the grocery store or at the gas station, because it was probably one out of every 10 million times my brothers and I asked for a candy bar at the gas station that we got one. Right. So even something simple like that, I think is nice. Right. So I think it's fine to have that medium term. But for me, I think mine's going to be centered around the education part. Like, hey, you're going to be that part's going to be taken care of, because that should be a priority in your life, is being educated, being able to be success, and making a choice that, you're going to grow up to do something. Even if you grow up, heck, welders, people who do power lines, those people make good money too. There's things you can do that don't involve education, right? So I am still battling that. So I know I haven't given you the exact answer, but I think I'm on the fence of being very extreme, but also understand that, I'm all for giving them a better life and giving them opportunities. And I think that's the other thing that you and I probably really can relate on is, you understand when you don't have money, also the opportunities available to you are pretty limited, right? How nice would it have been to go to a private prep school and been around other people and had the contacts? Imagine if your best friend's dad was a CEO. What a great contact that would be, even if you never worked with them. But to have somebody like that to put on your as a reference on your application, your job application. My reference was like my grandma, and my grandpa was like a logger for 30 years. You know what I mean? Like, so of course, obviously those are things that maybe we might not be able to give them, but that we take for granted that unfortunately aren't a real thing. But I think by building wealth and giving them a sense of financial security, that could go a long way for raising a family, and something I think I try to take a little pride on.
I guess I agree with everything you said, and I really like how you have the skin in the game concept, because, for example, for me, we don't have children yet. We don't plan on having children for the next couple of years. I do have younger siblings. I have a younger brother who's 16. I have younger siblings who are babies. And so as I build wealth, I also want to go ahead. I don't want to wait until I'm a multi-millionaire in order to start helping them get ahead in life. So, for example, one of my things that I just did, I'm starting to build my little brother's credit. I added him onto the credit card. That way he comes out with 750, 800 credit score. I keep it paid off every single month. And that's going to already give him the leg up. I guess, and the reason I started this is because the reason I started this question is because a lot of times when people do come from nothing, they say, look, I want you to struggle as hard as I did.
Yeah.
And I don't agree with that concept. I agree. You should earn what.
Yes.
And so my way of having him earn things, for example, his first car, I told him, look, every dollar you save towards a car and you pay for a car, I will match it up to X amount of dollars.
Yeah.
There's only two conditions. One, I'm only matching, so up to this amount. So if you save this amount, I give you this amount, and you cannot get a car loan. Those are the two conditions. And that's what we're going to do. And I plan on doing the same thing for his college. I'm going to say, look, every scholarship you get or every dollar you put towards your college education, I will match it up to X amount of dollars. That way you have skin in the game. You're going to be taking college seriously because that's your money.
Yeah.
But also I'm helping you because I don't want you to have to work as hard to get where I am if I can help you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's awesome advice, and a perfect way to go about it is like giving them incentive without feeling like you're just giving, just handing it out, right?
Exactly, because they appreciate it more.
Yeah,
they appreciate it more when they have to do some work to get the reward. So
it builds a little work ethic too. Who doesn't like a little work ethic?
Exactly. No one. I feel like deep down, no one wants to be handed everything.
Correct.
It ends up creating a bad character if everything is just given to you in life. 100%. But when you have to work for it, but you have someone helping you, I think it propels you forward, but it also keeps you humble to appreciate, like, everybody doesn't have a brother like me.
If our parents are listening to this, that's exactly what they say. See, I just humbled you. I just, made you have a little better work ethic.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm glad I'm kind of we're on the same track with that. They want to have some skin in the game without having everything just handed to them.
I love the credit card idea. So definitely make sure you continue to bring that one up, because that's actually something my wife, her mom did for her. And
Mhm.
that was awesome. Cause I remember when I was in college, I did not have a credit card. Or I didn't have one growing up. I had no credit. And honestly, having no credit is just as bad as having, it's actually, in my opinion, worse than having bad credit.
Mhm.
And so I spent, again, I was clearly destined for this, but I spent all of college just having a credit card that I got in my loan. I remember my amount at the time was $3,000 was the limit. And I would literally, put money on it, pay it off every month. And I did that my entire college career and well into, now finance. And, now we have great scores, but, it's one that I had to work for, where if you just go do that now for your whether it's your own kid, your sibling, and you help just build their credit, that gives them such a better opportunity to do something like that. Even something simple like getting if they do have to take a small loan, same thing. Now they have skin in the game, they got to pay that loan back, or they'll lose the car, right? So when they get good credit, you usually want to keep it too, So it kind of gives us something to work for. And tracking your credit score is a lot of fun. It's nice whenever it hits that that 700 plus mark. And
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, don't go to the party bragging about it, but it's definitely something to be
It's
proud
something
about.
that you're laying in bed and you're like, man. Oof. All right, man. So let's go ahead and transition to the final questions of the show. These are the same questions I ask every single guest. You've hit on a bunch of them, but we're just going to go over them again super quick. So first question is, everyone has their own definition of what it means to have financial peace. What is your definition?
Opportunities and choices, simple. Achieving financial peace is providing yourself really the ability to make your own choices, to make choices that you want, and have the ability to take advantage of opportunities that they come, right? So I think that's always been my priority, is having choices and opportunity, to take advantage of opportunity, I should say.
I love it. I love it. So if there are listeners out there that want to start building wealth and they have no clue where to get started, what would you tell them?
Roth IRA is definitely king. In my opinion, it's the best investment. But really, the first start is, so if you're somebody who's trying to do it on your own, go to large wirehouses. So Schwab, personally, who I would recommend. I love Schwab. Fidelity, Vanguard. Those are all large wirehouses, right? Go there. So from there, set up an account there. You can make a plan to first pay down your debts, to contribute at least what you're getting matching your employer plan. So if you have an employer and they're matching 3% of your 401k, at least do 3%. Outside, out of mind. It literally comes out of your check before you get it, right? Get that set up. And then, like we talked earlier, do, of course, a 20% savings goal if possible, pay down your debts, and then from there, fund your Roth IRA and your non-qualified brokerage. And for people who are saying, well, that's all great, these are just the vehicles, these are all things you can set up. But then also, when it comes to how do I choose the investments, a lot of these wirehouses, they're not fiduciaries. Like I said, you're hiring yourself as a fiduciary. So they're going to take the cookie cutter approach. All of them have some sort of like target retirement age fund. So if you're, in that case, just use target funds. They have some sort of cookie cutter, at least, approach. That's better than nothing, especially for people starting. If you're going to start a couple $50 or $100 or whatever it is, go get one of those target funds, choose, whatever model you're comfortable with, and go from there. And then at some point when you build your wealth, if you turn to an advisor, great. But I think doing nothing is worse than nothing, than
doing the minimum,
than the alternative. So take the incentive to go set this up, whether it's with an advisor on your own. There's so many options out there for you to be able to get this done.
Gotcha. Yeah, I love that. I love that, because sitting by idly, you're losing money.
Exactly.
That's just a flat out truth.
Absolutely. Especially for young people.
So if there's one piece of advice that you could give people to avoid doing to build wealth, what would that be?
Stop thinking that the media is tailor-made advice for you. That random guy you follow on TikTok does not care about your finances. People are paid off subscribers or clicks, right? There's no get rich quick scheme when it comes to finance. Save with a purpose and make a choice to build long-term wealth. Make that choice, right? And then read as much as you can. Of course, obviously educate yourself. But I mentioned the choice because, everybody, of course, every day you have the ability to make choices, right? I think if you can every day consistently choose to save X amount, carve out your savings, build around or spend the rest, you could do it. So make that choice sooner rather than later, and you're certainly gonna be very happy that you did it. And the last part of that, you mentioned the eighth one in the world. We talk about compounding interest, but another part on that whole idea was that people who understand compound interest earn it. People who don't pay it, right? And so just understand that once you understand how this works, and the fact that if I start early and I just start putting aside a little bit of money, and that this money can turn into millions by me just doing nothing and just letting it work in the market, that's going to blow your mind. and give you that opportunity to hopefully also achieve financial success.
Yeah, and that's one thing I really wanted to hit on in our compound interest episode was that look, our brain is not wired to understand compound interest. Like you can't ask somebody what is $100,000 compounded 3% at 6% over the next 12 years. Like they're not just going to be able to do that. We're trained to think linearly.
Exactly.
So with that being said, playing with something like a compound interest calculator, it really opens up your eyes. Like, wait a minute, if I put $1 a day away, it's going to turn into $150,000 in 30 years. Like, what? That doesn't make any sense. That doesn't make any sense. It does not make any sense.
It almost sounds too good to be true.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important. And
Yes.
if you don't understand it, you're going to be paying it, whether it's on a credit card or on a personal loan or whatever it is, payday lender, you're paying it.
Absolutely. 100%.
You're lining their pockets. So, all right. If you could ask anyone, dead or alive, one question, who would it be and what would you ask them?
Of course, the opportunist in my would say, "Hey, can I go back to when Jeff Bezos was being told that a online bookstore was a stupid idea?" I would have been like, "Hey, let me tell you another idea how we can make a lot of money."
Yeah.
But the more I think about this, I think for me, I would probably just go back and definitely see, ask my grandmother on my dad's side. She unfortunately she passed away. She was killed by a drunk driver whenever my brothers and I was 4. My mom was pregnant with my brother, so we never got the opportunity to really know her. So I think for me, as I've gotten older, I would love to just go back and know who she was. Listen to some stories, understand her life. So yeah, I think for me, it'd definitely probably be her. I've been fortunate enough to have the other grandparents on my side of the family, so she's the one missing.
Yeah. Damn, that's awesome, man. So, Joey, where can people find out more about you?
We do have a website. So the company I work for is called North Star, but if you just go to the website and look up my name, or my personal website is northstarfinancial.com/advisors/Joey Snyder. Also my via email at joey.snyder@northstarfinancial.com. And I technically am on LinkedIn. I'm not a big social media guy, but I do technically have a LinkedIn page. Same thing. Just look at my name and North Star, and you should certainly be able to find me.
Awesome, Joey. Man, I really appreciate you taking the time out of your morning, man. Come on. You brought a lot of good information, man. There's a lot of stuff I have written down that some things I didn't even know. Like the way you put into words the difference between compounding and amortized interest is just, I always knew what it was, but I could never put it into words.
Absolutely.
So that's amazing, man. You definitely brought a whole bunch of knowledge, and I really think people are gonna get a lot of information out of this, and I think this is gonna help people make the change.
Because that's all we hope for.
Exactly. You said once you believe you can do it, then it's done. It's done. Once you believe, like, okay, I can become a millionaire. I can change my children's life. I can change my family tree. It's done. That's the hardest part, is changing your thought process. So
and this is something you can control. This is all up to you. This is not something you have to rely on somebody else. So you could take advantage of the market and take advantage of your situation and better that situation by just following some simple, basic financial guidance. So, I appreciate you having us, and hopefully people get some good nuggets out of this, and it helps them. So hopefully in 30 years from now, a lot of people talk about how you helped them become a millionaire, James.
And it's all thanks to all of you and all of the other guests that come on. But I'm going to get up out of here, man. I hope you have a great rest of your day, man.
Absolutely. You too, James. I appreciate it.
Later.
Bye.
And guys, that was my interview with Mr. Joey Snyder. Like I said, I really hope that you guys enjoyed that interview. As I stated in the interview, I was learning stuff. For example, the difference between amortized interest payments and compounding interest. I already knew what compounding interest was, and I understood the concept of both. I knew they were not the same thing, but I never was able to articulate why they weren't the same thing. And he really did a great job, man. I learned so much from this guy. And as you guys could see, although we don't agree on every single little thing, our overall message is the same. And it really warms my heart to realize people like him are out there, and they're doing this work to help people like you guys out. We went over a bunch of things like who needs a financial advisor? What is their job? What does it mean to be a fiduciary? So remember, guys, that is the number one thing you want to ask anyone you deal with, whether it's a financial advisor, a real estate agent that you're working with, if you're working with a mortgage broker, you always want an insurance agent. You always want to be working with a fiduciary. You don't want to be sold something that isn't exactly right for you. Okay. And he goes over that splendidly. He went over how they're paid, and I got his opinion on, you know, all the things around finances, guys. So I really hope, I really hope that you guys got something interesting from the conversation. With that being said, you guys can always reach out to him. He supplied his information, which will be down in the show notes below. You guys can check it out. You guys can hit him up. But like I said, he's all around great guy. I can't wait to have him on the podcast in the future to cover even more stuff, guys, because we only scratched the surface. We started with generalities, but next time he comes on, we're gonna get deeper and deeper and deeper into it, and we're all gonna build wealth together, guys. And so this was absolutely an amazing show, and I really hope you guys got something from it. Like I say all the time, if you guys do want some one-on-one financial coaching from myself, I do have my Calendly down below. You guys can click it, make an appointment, and we'll do a conversation over Zoom to get a tailored plan specifically for where you are in your finance journey and figure out how we can get you to where you want to be and ultimately get that financial peace I think everyone deserves. But with that being said, guys, I'm going to head on out. I'm the host of the Gen Z Money Podcast, James Bowman. And always remember, you're only as secure as your ability to perform. So spend your life accumulating assets that can perform for you. Later, guys.